Welcome back to Route Double. When you last left off... Oh yeah, we went to the park and we got some exposition. A lot of exposition. We're getting fully introduced this time. We've gotten this story a few times by now, I think. We're getting fully introduced to Japan as the advanced BC nation.
まあ、フランスの情勢がよくわからないけど、環境は全然違うんだろうな。
Oh, and the French hate BC. Because they want to keep their thoughts to themselves. Ho ho.
そうそう。つまりサリはまだ新しい環境に慣れてないだけなんだよ。
Okay, yeah, that's the ultimate source. That was the ultimate source of this conversation, is being concerned about Salyu adjusting. So, Communicator Protection Bill, BC law, which established these cities, which were for protection, but also very convenient research outposts. So, just saying, don't trust your government. There's also earlier conversation about the French didn't like it. America's America, so they hate everything strange and unusual and not traditional. So.
緊張するのも当然。だったら優しくしてあげなきゃね。
Oh damn BC kids, probably voting for Obama. Mashiro asked with a smile, which moved Natsuhiko. Wait, this is 2030, so we're far past that. Hopefully Trump is long and gone by then. He was impressed by her consideration and attention to detail.
Mashiro
Enough about that. Don't. Well, that's a good way of saying it.
何言ってんの？昔の夏彦がやってたことを真似してるだけだよ。
そうなのか？昔の僕はいいやつだったってこと？まあ、
今も十分いいやつだけどね、夏彦は。意固地なのがたまに傷なんだよね。
Okay, now we're back to the original conversation, which is that Natsuhiko has changed significantly from when he was a kid to now. It all stems from that one incident.
そうかもな。
Natsuhiko gave a wry smile. Couldn't completely approve of Mashiro's viewpoint. After the years went by, his way of thinking solidified. It wasn't something that could be unlearned that easily. Nevertheless...
仕方ないな。真白に免じて少しは警戒を緩めてみよう。
うん、そのくらいでいいよ。今はそれが精一杯ってね。
なんだそれ、またアニメの引用か？
そう、私たちが生まれるずっと前のね。
Oh. The conversation derailed before long. Calm breeze enveloped them, and thus the two of them spent some leisurely time at the park. Once the sun had set, they boarded the bus again and headed home. The bus dropped them off at the stop closest to their homes. Mashiro would ordinarily stop by her house, but since they stayed out late, she went directly to the Tenkawa residence today. Uh-oh. But by the time they reached the house, Natsuhiko noticed something strange. There was a jet-black car parked out in front of his house.
高級車っぽいね。誰の車？
さあ。
His head tilted to the side, Natsuhiko walked past the car and entered his home. They took their shoes off at the entrance and headed to the living room when... Natsuhiko and Mashiro were greeted by an unbelievable sight.
Salyu!
Eh? Salyu was there in the Tenkawa's living room. Oh. Yuuri was standing next to her with a smile.
何事？
なんでサリュがここにいるんだ？
今日からここに住むことになったから。
What?
は？なんでまた？ユーリ、君は何か聞いてるのか
？Hmm? Yuuri didn't clearly answer whether or not she knew about this situation. Salyu spoke to Natsuhiko without giving Yuuri a single glance.
これは決定事項。もう取り消せない。決定事項って？
っていうかそもそも なんでサリュがうちに？
それは
That's a fair question, actually. Then when a voice rang out from further inside the room.
私の一存よ。
Hmm? Natsuhiko turned to the voice in disbelief. Hi, Mom.
久しぶりね、夏彦。
母さん。
博士。
There stood Natsuhiko's mother, Miyoko Tenkawa. Which meant that the car outside was probably a courtesy car for the professor. As a renowned physicist, she was extremely busy by nature. She was always stationed in Labo and very rarely came home, meaning her communication with her son was essentially non-existent.
しばらく連絡取れないと思ったらいきなりこれか。
仕事が忙しいんだもの、仕方ないじゃない。
You're always busy, Mom.
まあそれはいいよ。それよりどういうことだ？サリュがうちに住むって。
ユイはフランスから引っ越してきた直後で住むところがまだ決まっていないのよ。だからうちに住まわせることにしたの。
The professor called Salyu by her real name, Yuuri, somewhat intimately. That only got on Natsuhiko's nerves.
僕らに相談もなしにか。だいたいサリュと母さんはどういう関係なんだよ。
Just going a fine way to.
桃園の親戚よ。つまりあなたとの親戚。
What? Now that he thought about it, his mother's maiden name was Senum. That's a handy thing to remember now. He did get the feeling that she said she'd lived in France before. So perhaps they really were related, but still.
本当なのか、その話。
嘘をついてどうするの？私の祖父の妹の孫がフランス人と結婚して生まれたのがこの子よ。あなたとは9親等離れているからほぼ他人だけれど。
Oh, third cousins with 8th-degree kinship, say though, so you're essentially unrelated.
いや、だったら余計にそんな子を住まわせるなんて。
Huh? Why?
いいじゃない。部屋は余っているんだから。
サリュはそれでいいのか？
異論はない。博士がそう言うなら従うだけ。そう。これは決定事項よ。もういいでしょ、夏彦。それじゃあ私、仕事が残ってるからラボに戻るわ。
勝手にしろ。
Natsuhiko lost his temper over how the professor slowed down for nobody. The professor merely sighed and addressed Mashiro.
マシロちゃん、自己承諾になってごめんなさい。ゆうゆうよろしくね。はい。でも。
But why are you apologizing to me and not your son? It appeared not even Mashiro could quite understand the situation. He put a finger up to her temple and muttered in a worried tone.
ずいぶん急で、なんていうか、いろいろ大丈夫なんですか？大丈夫よ。この家についての所持はユイには全て伝えてあるから。え、そうなの、サリュ？無論承知。夏彦とユーリが一緒に暮らしていることも、真城がそれを知りながら食事を作りに通っていることも。そうなのならいいんだけど、何も知らなかったらなんていうか誤解されそうだからね。
Damn it, Mashiro, that's not what's important here. Professor ignored Natsuhiko, the only one staunchly against the situation, and continued.
それじゃみんな、これから仲良くね。
With that, the professor slipped past Natsuhiko and left the house. Soon enough, the car's engine roared and she zoomed away.
相変わらず身勝手な。
Hearing Natsuhiko's murmur, Salyu spoke out.
私がこの家に住むと迷惑？
Yeah, I mean that's a fair point. Is it more you're not comfortable with this situation, or are you not comfortable with your mom swooping in and making decisions without bothering to care about your opinion and swooping out? Could be either.
いや。
Probably the latter.
だとしたら話が違う。博士は夏彦たちは反対しないはずと言っていたのに。
She doesn't know. When he heard that, Natsuhiko became furious again. Not at Salyu for saying that, but at his mother for her complete disregard for his and Yuuri's opinions. Yuuri strained to put a smile on her face, somewhat uncomfortably.
やだな、夏彦。何暗い顔してんの？いいじゃない。住人が一人増えるのも賑やかできっと楽しいよ。
ああ、まあな。
Natsuhiko tried to sound amicable in front of Salyu. Yet, true, we don't want to make her feel bad. It's because we're mad at her mom. But in his heart of hearts, excitement wasn't really what he wanted. There was no way in hell I could have expected this. Natsuhiko Tenkawa just wants to live a quiet life. His life was changing drastically in ways he couldn't understand. He had just started to let his guard down, only for it to get pushed right back up. For you. Mashiro made dinner that day just like any other day. Everyone sat around the table. The only difference today was the addition of Salyu. Conversation was shockingly sparse. I mean, that was a very awkward situation earlier. Mashiro asked Salyu various questions, but only received short, blunt answers. Yuuri was here too, but Salyu basically didn't speak to her. Same with Natsuhiko. Thus, dinner ended without any improvement to the awkward atmosphere. Oh god, please don't leave. After Salyu gave a non-committal response, Mashiro sent her a fleeting glance, then spoke. I need to give you a pep talk, son. Right as Natsuhiko began to talk, Mashiro continued by means of telepathy. Natsuhiko nodded and left the house with Mashiro. Mashiro said with a wry smile as they left the entryway. Oh, yeah, of course. Naturally, Mashiro was also aware of how Yuuri's past experiences prevented her from going outside. Mashiro and Natsuhiko had consulted each other from time to time and agreed to quietly watch over her, but... Instead of the drastic change of going outside, bringing someone new inside to get to know her, maybe it's a small... might not be that... painful. Yeah, there. That's a good point. And that seems accurate to our current feelings. Natsuhiko could only halfway agree with that assessment. Mashiro's reasoning made sense, but he didn't expect that sort of thoughtfulness from his cold mother. Yeah. That's fair.
緊張？お前にはそういう風に見えたのか？
そりゃそうだよ。なんだかんだ言ってもあの子はまだ13歳の女の子なんだよ。年上の男子と同居することになって緊張しないわけないじゃん。
Fair.
もっと夏彦も話しかけて心をほぐしてあげてよ。
そうだな。
Natsuhiko couldn't bring himself to agree, but for now he decided to just go along with what she said.
わかった。なるべく努力するよ。
またその答え？
なあ、いや適当に答えてるわけじゃないんだけど。
まあいいよ。期待してるからね。それじゃあね、夏彦。また明日。
まあ、またな。
Marshall patted Natsuhiko on the shoulder before walking off into the night. Jeez, she's so soft-hearted. It's also one of Marshall's good points, but...
僕が関わるとなると、話は難しいぞ。
muttered before heading back to the house, but then...
何が難しいの？
Hello. Voice called out from the darkness of the entryway, startling Natsuhiko.
いたのか、サリュー。
今出てきた。夏彦が戻ってこないから。
真白との話聞いてた？
いや、何も。
Really now? Natsuhiko had some doubts, but he couldn't read anything out of Salyu's expression.
いや、どうでもいいような話だったんだけどさ。サリュが可愛いとかなんとか。
Natsuhiko tried to gloss the things over, but immediately... What? Stuffed animal in Salyu's arms squealed. Natsuhiko was once again startled. At the same time, Salyu's expression stiffened.
サリュ、今それ泣いたか？
それが何か？
Salyu answered as if it were only natural for it to squeal like that. What of it? There's some sort of trick behind that thing. Salyu abruptly spoke in Natsuhiko's confusion.
夏彦は私を警戒しているのね。
え？いや、そんなことは。
だとしたら侵害。私はあなたを守るためにここへ来た。
What?
僕を守る？ちょっと待ってくれ。なんで君が僕を守るんだ？
博士に頼まれた。
母さんが？いやでも何から僕を守るって言うんだ？別に僕は何かのビップってわけじゃないのに。
博士曰く近頃はこの辺も物騒。いつ何に巻き込まれるかわからないとのこと。
Natsuhiko honestly couldn't understand Salyu's words or his mother's intentions. Salyu may have been good at sports and studies, but she would be the last person you'd imagine to be a bodyguard.
だいたいなんで君みたいな女の子に守られなきゃならないんだ。普通逆ってまあ僕が君を守る義理もないけど。
私だって義理があるわけではない。
Okay, fair.
意味がわかんないよ。そもそも巻き込まれるって具体的には。
But when he started to speak, Natsuhiko suddenly remembered what happened yesterday. Salyu was there at the scene of Ukita's accident.
これから君の周りでおかしなことが起こるかもしれない。
Thanks, Ukita.
だが一応注意だけはしておいてくれ。
But think of it, Mr. Ukita did say that. Natsuhiko couldn't help but feel that those words and that situation had something to do with all this. Don't tell me that Salyu's arrival could have been one of those strange things Mr. Ukita was talking about. Did he mean that even stranger things were going to start occurring? And these are the things that Salyu was here to protect us from? Did Salyu come here to protect Natsuhiko when that time came?
サリュー、母さんは僕に何か危険が迫ってると思っているのか？
詳しいことは私も知らない。ただ守れと言われただけ。
Salyu answered indifferently. Did she really not know the details, or did she merely not feel like answering? Natsuhiko couldn't even tell.
とにかく夏彦は素直に私に守られるべき。そう警戒されると私としても行動しにくい。
My inclination is to say no. This feels like a... You know what? Why not?
そして邪険にされると嫌な気持ちになる。
I'm sorry.
それは申し訳ない。
I'm not intentionally trying to be. Natsuhiko was overwhelmed by her persuasive power. Whoa! Okay. Who's in here to protect me? What's this girl saying? Natsuhiko gazed at Salyu, not quite understanding what was going on through her head.
とにかく夏彦は素直に私に守られるべき。そう警戒されると私としても行動しにくい。
Legitimately curious.
そして
それは申し訳ない。
分かればいい。それじゃあ私は日課があるから資質に戻る。
Oh, okay, so this is the very low point.
おい、ちょっと。
Salyu abruptly ended their discussion and went back inside. Alright, let's go back.
とにかく夏彦は素直に私に守られるべき。そう警戒されると私としても行動しにくい。
Alright. Enthralling, but she showed no intention of talking whatsoever. Should I try to ask her what she means? Would she even humor me with an answer, though? Natsuhiko mulled over his choices. Salyu abruptly spoke up.
夏彦。
え？
星好き？
星？
Salyu pointed up. And sure enough, there were countless stars floating up above.
別に好きでも嫌いでもないけど。
そう。
それがどうかして。
Salyu cut Natsuhiko off before he could finish.
夏彦の名前の意味って何？
はい？
Natsuhiko stumbled over his words like a fool in light of her barrage of questions.
さあ、知らないけど意味なんかあるのかな？
夏に生まれたの？
ああ、うん。6月生まれ。だからかな。
そう。
Okay. Somehow tense silence fell between them. He's trying. Salyu ignored Natsuhiko's bewilderment and suddenly continued the conversation.
名前には何らかの意味が込められている。意味のない名前なんてない。
そういうものか？
そういうもの。あなたたちの名前も意味深い。
何の話？
気づいてない？まあ偶然だろうとは思うけど。
気づいてないも何も。
Hmm? You didn't understand her in the slightest.
意味があるといえば、サルというあだ名もそう。
Eh?
真白は何も考えずつけたのだと思うけど、サリュとはフランス語でヤーという意味。
Ah.
すなわち挨拶、コミュニケーションの始まり。
She unironically gave her the perfect nickname for wanting to be friends.
まあ、そうなんだ。
It was all news to him, but he wasn't going to let her know that.
さらに言えば、日本語にもサイルユという響きの似た言葉がある。
Salyu?
Well,
知らないの？
知らない。
夏彦は無知。日本人のくせに。
hey now. Sudden disparagement annoyed Natsuhiko. The hell's going on? Can we get this conversation over with already? And when that thought crossed Natsuhiko's mind, that Salyu's stuffed animal that had a weirder cry than before. Salyu gasped when she heard it. Why did she gasp? Salyu looked at the utterly confused Natsuhiko with gloomy eyes.
では、私は日課があるので失礼する。
ちょっと。
Salyu ignored Natsuhiko and darted back inside. Yeah?
なんだ今のは。
Good question. Natsuhiko was at his wit's end and not understanding a lick of what had occurred. It didn't look like he could find an answer just by thinking about it. The questions only piled up. So in the end, never heard what exactly she meant by protecting him. But still, honestly, what's with that girl? Salyu's attitude was the same as when they parted ways at the Parapsychology Research Center earlier that day. Natsuhiko stood alone at the entryway, pondering Salyu's words. Still, protect me how? Salyu's words were most likely not being made out of the kindness of her heart. She appeared to only be begrudgingly following Dr. Tenkawa's orders. Why did Mom really order Salyu to do that? After all, Rokame City excelled in public order. Very rarely did anyone get dragged into a crime. Even so, it was something that bothered him. Now that I think about it, Mr. Ukita's part of Leibo's staff. He's Mom's co-worker. What if that car crash wasn't an accident? What if some circumstances are causing those with connections to Leibo to be targeted? Considered the thought for a moment, but he couldn't think of any rationale behind it. Why did the professor give neither Natsuhiko nor Salyu a proper explanation? Furthermore, did Salyu really come just to protect Natsuhiko? Natsuhiko muttered to himself and quit trying to think about it. Doesn't look like there's going to be any real harm done, so I'll just leave things as they are. If thinking won't solve something, then just try not to think about it. That was the mantra of Natsuhiko's lifestyle. Even so, Natsuhiko had a faint worry in the back of his mind. Worry that events that he couldn't see were slowly coming to a head. Natsuhiko took a quick look at his watch and realized it was already past 8 p.m. Pulled himself together and hopped back through the entryway into his home. In the living room, Natsuhiko saw no sign of Salyu. Instead, he found Yuuri quietly reading a book.
おかえりひこり。ちゃんとマシロン送ってあげた？
ああ、送ってあげたよ。
えらいえらい。
Yuri's casual tone of voice was relief to Natsuhiko. A lot happened today, but it's a huge relief that Yuri's the same as always. His worries and weariness were washed away with one look at Yuri's smile. Natsuhiko returned her smile and sank into the sofa.
ユーリは今日はどういう風に過ごしたんだい？
昨日と同じ。編み物を少しして、続きものの本を2冊読んだよ。
続きもの？どんな本？
とても切ない恋愛小説。主人公の過去について自らの記憶をもとに記したっていう形式のお話なんだけど。冒頭に出てくる記憶というのはすごく曖昧なものだっていう言葉が印象的でぐいぐい引き込まれちゃった。
Memories are ambiguous.
記憶は曖昧なもの？
そう、主人公曰く人は自分の記憶を自覚しないままいろいろと書き換える性質がある。だからこれから語る物語も真実とは限らないってね。そんな始まり方の恋愛小説ってなんか面白そうでしょ？
Certainly unique.
ちょっと煙に巻かれた感じもするけど。
でもね、確かにその通りだって話を読み進めていけばわかるの。記憶はいつだって不確かで、現在の状況とか思い出す時の心境によって全く変わるって。
Current situation and mental state.
え、そんなことってあるか？
あるよ。例えば素敵な恋をしている人がいたとするでしょ。その恋が続いているうちは恋人との記憶は輝いて見えるけど、恋が終わったら辛いだけになっちゃうかもでしょ。
Yeah.
確かにそうかもしれないな。経験がないから何とも言えないけど。
恋だけじゃなくてもさ、日常のさりげないシーンでもそういうのは起こると思うよ。
Well, it's really colored by the future, isn't it? How you look back on memories. Look back on memories that are a good time. If you lose that person, you look back at them. Perhaps grief, missing what's long past. Grief, fondness, remembering what you had. If things ended badly between you, look back at that with regret.
あるセリフを言ったのが自分だったのか相手だったのかが入れ替わったりね。
なあ、それはわかる。真白ともよくお前が言った、いやあんたが言ったの問題で揉めることが多い。
That thought didn't come out quite as well as I wanted, but I think you got the idea.
でしょ。そしてこの主人公も自分の過去について思い返すたびに微妙に記憶が書き換わっていることを自覚していくの。
Well, that's funky.
事実が変わらなくとも思いは移ろう。絶対の真実なんかない。あらゆる過去は曖昧な霧の中にある。だからどの記憶が本当だったのか主人公自身にもわからない。だけどそこまで読んだところ、続きはまた明日。
そうか。
Even Yuuri was confusing him now. Natsuhiko's shoulders drooped. She softly smiled and continued.
でもね、この物語の結論がどうなるのかわからないけど、希望のある話って感じがしない？
記憶ってのは曖昧だってことが？
うん。記憶は移ろうものだけど、だからこそいつか辛い記憶も悲しい思い出もひっくるめて綺麗なものに変わる日が来ればいいなって思うよ。
Her words sounded more than just a simple impression of a novel, but her expression was unexpectedly calm, which relieved Natsuhiko as he answered.
そうだな。本当にそう思うよ。それにしてもユーリ、そういう記憶に関する話好きだな。前にもそんな小説の話してくれたじゃないか。同じ事件に対して登場人物全員がバラバラの証言をするやつ。
Oh.
大好き。自分の記憶でさえ移ろうんだから、まして他人同士だと全然別の印象を持つこともあるんだろうね。
Is that the Rashomon effect? The original Rashomon story where all of the major characters in the story had different testimonial of what happened. At the very end, you get the unexpected character who witnessed the actual truth. The actual truth being rather mundane and underwhelming. Now that you mentioned it, Natsuhiko noticed that he and Mashiro had completely contrary impressions of Salyu. Yeah. Reminds me, I haven't directly asked Yuuri about her yet, have I? With that thought in mind, Natsuhiko asked her with a sigh.
なあ、ユーリ。印象といえばだけどさ。
何？
サリュについてだけど、どう思う？
うしたの急に。ヒコリンはサリュちゃん苦手なの？
いや、そんなことはないけど、急に同居人が増えてユーリは大丈夫かなって思ってさ。
私は大丈夫だけど、むしろサリュちゃんが心配かな。
Oh,
緊張している風に見えるよ。
you're sweet.
え？ユーリもか？
ねえヒコリン、サリュちゃんと友達になってあげてよ。私にそうしてくれたようにさ。
This feels like a character building scene.
ユーリと友達になった時みたいに。
That was a story from long, long ago. Natsuko's brain became filled with memories of those days. It felt as if time itself were melting away as we recalled the memory of the day he and Yuuri first met. Ah. Just imagining this how the scene would play out if you just set senses to minimum. He recalled the day 10 years ago when they met, and then immediately forgot it. Brain empty. Moving on. That day alone, all of Natsuhiko's playmates were busy, including Mashiro.
せっかく日曜日だってのに。
Natsuhiko went and played by himself in the park, bored. That was when he met Yuuri, who was doing the same. For some reason, tears were spilling down her face. She was so quiet, yet so sad. Upon seeing her, Natsuhiko got concerned and asked her,
なあなあ、なんで泣いてるの？
That was the first conversation Natsuhiko and Yuuri ever had.
僕、夏彦。
夏彦くん？
お前、ことのユーリだろ？ちょっと前に近くに引っ越してきた。友達になろうよ。せっかくご近所なんだからさ。
いいの？
え？友達になっちゃダメなのか？
だって私超能力者だから。
Nesper?
超能力者？
Ah.
ああ、コミュニケーターってこと？それで？
Hmm.
人の気持ちとか読めちゃうかもしれないよ。怖くないの？
別にそんなことないよ。なあなあ、一緒に遊ぼうぜ。
ありがとう。
Then the two of them started to play together. Though they weren't quite sure what they could play with just the two of them. They started off on only playing simple games like Hop Hopscotch, and Esken. Just hopping up and down on the lawn brought a smile to Yuri's face.
なかなかやるな、ユーリ。
そんなことないよ。夏彦くんの方がケンケンパもエスケンもずっとうまいよ。
でもさすがにちょっとくたびれた。休憩しよう。
Oh, the two of them sat down together on the grass. Natsuhiko took a deep breath and asked Yuri a question.
ところでユーリはさ、なんでこの町に引っ越してきたの？
お父さんがその方が私のためだって。六名士は超能力者が多いからって。ここなら私も気味悪がられないはずって。
That reminded Natsuhiko. His mother had told him that this town had far more communicators than other towns.
そうだね。僕も適性があるらしいし。
Good attitude, Natsuhiko.
夏彦くんもコミュニケーターなの？
I have the right attitude for it, but neither the altitude nor the aptitude.
なんかそうみたい。テレパシーもまだ使えないけどね。
そうなんだ。実は私も
同じだ。
Natsuhiko laughed. Yuri smiled in reply.
それにね、僕だけじゃないよ。 知り合いの真っ白ってやつも適性が高いって自慢してたし、この町はコミュニケーターがいっぱいだよ。いて当たり前ってくらいだから、誰もユーリを気味悪がったりしないよ。
夏彦くんも？
もちろん。
絶対？
絶対だって。ユーリは心配性だな。
Natsuhiko smiled, and Yuuri smiled back in return.
よかった。私、本当はね、すごく不安だったの。
え？なんで？
お引っ越ししてから友達できるかなって、なんか信じられなかったから。
でももうできたよね。
Oh.
この公園には子供がいっぱい集まるからさ、ここに通えば他の友達もできるよ。
ありがとう。私いっぱい通うね。初めて来たのに夏彦くんと友達になれたし。
Yuuri said only that much before suddenly making a face as if she had suddenly remembered something.
そういえば、なんで夏彦くんは私に声かけてくれたの？見たことない子なのに、それも女の子なのに。
それはなんとなく。
なんとなくか。
Yuuri seemed a little disappointed. But Natsuhiko lied. The real reason was because he saw Yuuri crying. That's why he called out to her. Because he wanted to be there for her. And for these past 10 years, he had always been. Once he had remembered that day, he finally became self-aware of the reason why he had his guard up around Salyu. See, so that's what it was. Afraid of Mom and Salyu trying to change my current life. This home was a place of peace for Natsuhiko. A safe haven from all the evils that threatened to break Yuuri's fragile heart. Natsuhiko had already almost lost that refuge once, only barely managing to recover it. He'd been fervently protecting it ever since. I mean, there's definitely a who's the number one. And there's Yuuri. He didn't like the feeling of an outsider stepping foot into his sanctuary, which was why he was putting such an emphasis on Yuri's feelings in the present situation.
なあユーリ、本当にサリュが住むことについて異論はないんだな。
ないよ。ヒコリンは？
僕個人はどうでもいいんだ。ユーリの考えに合わせたいんだよ。
Yeah, fair.
私は大丈夫だよ。
本当に？気を使ってるだけじゃなくて？
本当だよ。ヒコリン心配性だな。
そうか。
Yuuri turned Natsuhiko's words from yesterday against him.
どうやら心配性はお互い様みたいだな。
心配してくれるのは嬉しいけど、でもどうしてそんなに気にするの？
僕は正直戸惑ってるんだよ。あの子妙なことを言うからな。
妙なことって？
僕を守りに来たとかなんとか、なんか逆に不吉じゃないか？
At those words, Yuuri made an odd smile. Then suddenly spoke in a quiet voice. Uh-oh.
ヒコリン、悪い方に取っちゃダメだよ。
え？
サリュちゃんはね、きっと本心で言ってるの。
Those words startled Natsuhiko. Hello. What? Something's different about Yuuri. It's like yesterday. She suddenly spoke with a serious look on her face. She never used to do that in the past. She seemed almost like an entirely different person. Yuuri continued, staring straight into Natsuhiko's confused eyes.
サリュちゃんはヒコリンを守ることに自分の役目を見出したんだよ。あの子はずっと それを欲していたんだから。
ユーリ、まるでサリを前から知ってるような口ぶりじゃないか。まさかもともと知り合いだったのか。
If that were the case, then he'd easily understand why she wasn't at all disturbed by Salyu's sudden move-in. But Yuuri silently shook her head.
私もヒコリンと同じくさっき会ったばっかりだよ。でも
What?
私にはわかるんだ。
Oh, no. Oh, that's an obvious bad end. I mean, just leave it here, see what happens.
どうして？
どうしてだろうね。でもサリュちゃんはきっとヒコリンの味方だと思うよ。
味方だって。急にそんな風には思いにくいな。
そうだよね。
Yuuri smiled sadly as she said so.
変化することをヒコリンも私も避け続けてきたよね。だけどいつかは受け入れなければダメなんだよ。そうしなければずっと過去にとらわれたままになっちゃうから。
She fell silent. Only sound in the still room was the ticking of the hands on the wall clock. Clock? Natsuhiko gasped. That's right, yesterday. He started talking with his tone of voice. Looked at his watch only to find that it had broken before he had realized it. Way! Natsuhiko looked at his watch and stared in disbelief. The dial had cracked. The hands were stopped, and the date displayed was days into the future. 9/16, 6/19. Early morning, 5 days from today.
どうして？
Yuuri continued despite Natsuhiko's terror.
ねえ、ヒコリン。わからないことがいくつあっても、疑わしいことだらけでも、何が本当で何が嘘でも、ヒコリンは善意に囲まれているはずだよ。だから周りの人を疑わないで。疑うなら私だけでいい。
And with that, Yuuri turned around and left the living room.
ユーリ？待ってくれ。それどういう意味だ？
Natsuhiko chased after Yuuri, placed his hand on the living room door, and opened it. The jammed gate opened with a jarring sound. Before Natsuhiko could think, he tumbled over from the excess momentum. And he knocked his back against the floor.
Natsuhiko, 大丈夫？
Masha called out to him. Salyu silently looked down on him. Natsuhiko was confused for a second as to what was going on. That's right, he was trying to escape from Labo. After straining to wrench open a jammed gate, they had finally gotten it open. Yuuri looked at Natsuhiko and anxiously spoke.
立てる？
Natsuhiko got up and looked toward the gate.
それより行こう。ここから先が多分第2エリアだ。
They all nodded and rushed towards Area 2. But still, Natsuhiko thought to himself. They were in such a desperate situation, yet Natsuhiko still just spent a moment in deep reminiscence. Why now? Why am I remembering what happened these past few days? He vividly recalled what had happened that day, as if time had rewound itself. Experienced with such clarity the conversation he had with Masho at the park, and the time Salyu showed up at their house, too. No, this is no time to be looking toward the past. Concentrate on getting out of here. As soon as Natsuhiko had that thought, two bizarre silhouettes appeared further down the hall.
何あれ？
Natsuhiko and the others stopped in their tracks. The two shadows were unidentifiable people with their faces hidden behind masks. They spoke as they headed towards the group.
君たちは職員じゃないな。どうしてこんなところに？
あなたたちは？
我々はラボから要請を受け、救助活動に来たレスキュー隊だ。
レスキュー隊？
Natsuhiko breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing those words. Thank goodness, if we leave Yuuri with these people, that's one thing off our minds.
君たちは要救助者だね。
ええ。偶然ここにいて巻き込まれてしまったんです。
他に連れは？
いえ、ここにいる4人で全員です。
何人だって？
え？
ねえ、4人です。特に体力のない女の子がいるので、その子から救助をお願いできますか？
分かった。ならばその子を。
As the rescue squad member spoke, he reached a hand out towards Natsuhiko. Vibe check. Suddenly, he found a foot lodged into his abdomen. Rescue worker collapsed onto the floor from the impact of the kick. Okay, what? Huh? Natsuhiko looked at the girl next to him in shock. It was Salyu that had kicked the man. She looked at Natsuhiko with level-headed eyes. The other rescue worker grabbed at Salyu's shoulder. Salyu grabbed that hand, and not a second later, she hurled the man away. The rescue worker hit the floor and lost consciousness. Salyu responded to Mashiro's hollow voice with a
Natsuhiko, Mashiro, あなたたちは甘い。心を許すのが早すぎる。
Okay.
なぜそうやってすぐに人を信じようとするの？
Salyu's cold gaze, one look from her, and Natsuhiko was instantly reminded of a sight he once saw. Those same eyes she had had when they first met. Those gazing eyes that looked at Natsuhiko expressionlessly from within the onlookers at a car crash. No, why? As soon as Natsuhiko had that thought, Yuuri whispered from beside him.
ヒコリン、忘れたの？サリュちゃんがどういう子だったか。
え？
今日まで一緒にいたんでしょ？あの子の言葉に隠された真実、それがどういう意味を持っていたのかわからない？それを少しずつでいいから思い出してほしいの。
We have a ghost Yuuri with us. Feels like no one has directly acknowledged it, but feels like we have a ghost Yuuri on our hands.
本当で何が嘘なのか、信じるべきなのは誰なのか。ヒコリン。
Oh, you could not grasp the true intention of those words.
答えは記憶の中にあるの。あの日の記憶の中に。
As soon as those words left Yuri's lips, Natsuhiko saw his watch in the corner of his eye. The tiny numbers on the dial were almost bizarrely clear and distinct. 9:12. 6:39. What happened on that day? Natsuhiko tried to confirm what Yuuri meant. He struggled to form his thoughts into words. Natsuhiko sprung up in his bed. For a second, he couldn't tell where he was. He took a look around before coming to the slow realization that he was in his room. His heart was still thumping hard.
また例の夢か。
Every so often, Natsuhiko would wake up from a nightmare like this. Every time he'd wake up, he'd forget about the particulars of the nightmare. Probably had something to do with that day 9 years ago. Perhaps.
朝から。まったく。
Natsuhiko shook his head in frustration before changing and leaving the room. Chapter 3. 4 days to go. When he got to the living room, Yuuri and Salyu were already there. Going to... I think... leave this here. Some things I want to do beforehand. 1. We only have one tip this time. Let's learn about Esken, shall we? A children's game where 2 teams compete to steal the treasure from the other team's side. The name of the game varies by locality, as it is sometimes known by other names such as letter S, letter 8, and S Battle. In preparation for play, a large letter S is first drawn on the ground, and each team takes one of the interior circles, closed by the S. Object is placed on each side as a treasure, and the game starts. Players hop on one foot to the other team's side to steal the treasure without crossing the letter S. The player touches the ground with both feet, they're out. Basic rules to the game can be easily appended to. The players can be birds that can only rest both feet on the ground when they reach the circles of land enclosed by the S. The S can be replaced by Z, using the defensive capabilities of both sides to make an all-out war. Or the S can be doubled up to tighten the defense and instead create a war of attrition. Treasure can be omitted, and the goal of the game then becomes total genocide of the other team. Okay. Gameplay varies widely depending on the locality. Total genocide. Let's see what happens if we do this.
どうして
Before we end off this video.
でもサルちゃんはきっとヒコリンの味方だと思うよ。
This is the first red choice we found.
急にそんなこと言われてもおいそれとは受け入れられないよ。
どうしても？
だって昨日今日会ったばかりの子だぞ。味方とか言われたって。悪意も敵意もないなんてそれも根拠のない話じゃないか。
ねえヒコリン、どうしてもそう思ってしまうの？
Natsuhiko averted his eyes from Yuri's pointed stare.
サリュがこの家に踏み込んでこなかったらここまで意固地にはならないさ。僕はユーリが心配なだけなんだ。もしサリュがユーリに何か悪い影響を与えたらと思うと。
だから受け入れられない。
Natsuhiko's silence brought a downcast expression to Yuri's face.
ごめんね、ヒコリン。そんなに心配かけて。だけどお願い。少しだけでいいから他の人にも心を開いて。
努力はしてるよ。
今のままじゃ足りないの。もっと心を開かなきゃヒコリン自身が苦しむことになると思う。
え？どうしてそんなことを？
だってヒコリンは今サルちゃんたちと力を合わせなければ命を落としてしまうような状況にいるんだもの。
Okay, this is interesting. The moment Yuuri said that. Whoa, scenery changed before Natsuhiko's very eyes. Whoa, okay. Now is this going to be... Oh, shit! When Natsuhiko came back to his senses, he found himself standing in front of a shut gate. Beside him were Yuuri, Mashiro, and Salyu. The girls responded to Natsuhiko's confusion.
どうしたの、Natsuhiko? ここはラボだよ。火災が起きているラボ。ぼーっとしている時間はない。炎が迫っている。
炎って。
He finally realized what was going on when he heard that word. That's right, I was trying to get out of Labo. So he strained himself to try and wrench the jammed doors open. Fires were raging behind them, gradually encroaching.
悪い、一瞬意識が飛んでいた。
大丈夫なの、Natsuhiko。やっぱり私も手伝うよ。
すまない、頼む。
He tried once more to pry open the door. Four of them, Natsuhiko, Mashiro, Salyu, and Yuuri, tried their best to pry open the gate. but it wouldn't open. No matter how much force they applied, the door would not budge.
くそ、なんで。
まずいよ夏彦、炎が。
Turning his head back in shock, Natsuhiko realized just how close the flames had gotten. Smoke billowed out at an alarming rate, polluting the clean air. The first to start coughing was Salyu.
みんな頑張れ。このゲートを開ければ。
Finally, even Natsuhiko succumbed to smoke inhalation. Natsuhiko fell to his knees, coughing violently. Mashiro, Salyu, and everyone else appeared to be having trouble breathing due to the smoke. Tears spilled out uncontrollably, blurring their vision. This is bad. Natsuhiko held his breath and tried to open the gate once more. Even so, it did not open. The gate was unyielding. Eventually, the girl's coughing grew weaker. Natsuhiko couldn't hold his breath any longer and was forced to take a deep breath. Smoke came rushing into his lungs at that very moment. His lungs craved for oxygen, but they got only ash instead. No amount of coughing bestowed him with any oxygen. Crap, I can't breathe. His head was spinning due to oxygen deprivation. His sight quickly grew dark. Felt like he was drowning. Vision blurred and turned black. Something assailed him from deep inside. It was the fear of death. Save me. Somebody. As Natsuhiko desperately pleaded, he heard a voice whispering into his ear.
ダメだよ、ヒコリ。
Yuuri?
だから言ったでしょ。みんなで力を合わせなければこうなってしまうんだよ。もしやり直せるなら今度こそあの子を信じてあげて。
That voice soon faded away into the distance. Yuuri, what are you? As soon as that question crossed his mind, his watch came into view. Were his eyes playing tricks on him? I would have sworn his watch had been broken, but now it appeared to be ticking away the time. The hour and minute hands looked blurry, but for some reason he could clearly make out the date. The date said 9/11. Let's see. It's the day Yuuri said. He said, to cooperate with Salyu would have become a life or death situation. It's too late. Natsuhiko's heart overflowed with regret. His consciousness sank into the darkness. Eventually, in the deep depths of his fading consciousness, awake, a voice called to him. Perhaps it was merely a memory of such a voice. But when he heard that voice, time returned to that day once more. Whoa, okay. Oh, okay. Interesting. The non-believer's fate, the result of a lack of mutual trust with Salyu. Okay. Both raising favor towards Salyu. To say, I was curious if we could have avoided that red senses input if we had gotten some more Salyu points beforehand. I'm curious. But alas. There you have it, our first bad ending. When we return, we'll dive into Chapter 3 of The Four. See what comes of our time living with Salyu. Until next time, until then.